Oil prices recently crossed $115 a barrel in the United States. As a result, there are credible models that indicate that if that price is sustained until the end of May, the US CPI inflation will rise to about 3.7%. And if that were to happen, American inflation would be at its highest level since September of 2023. During this surge in prices, Americans have spent an additional $240 million per day in fuel costs, going back to the beginning of the war in February. That's over $10 billion in increased spending so far. The longer the war lasts, the more inflation will continue to rise and persist at a high level. We're now in a world where the business cycle has turned down, the credit cycle has turned down, and the real estate collateral cycle has turned down. Even before the war in the Middle East started, economic indicators were showing increasing signs of distress. Manufacturing a global geopolitical crisis is just about the stupidest thing a political leader could do if trying to shepherd an economy to safety. The alarms were flashing red before the bombs fell. So what if this time really is different? Not different in the sense that it's never happened before in history, but different in the sense that what's on the horizon has never happened before in our lifetimes. We have nothing to compare this to. Too often, people look back at the worst experience they've had, reflect on it, and then channel their inner Friedrich Nietzsche. The idea behind the ethos of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger may make you more resilient, provided, of course, that it doesn't kill you. Since the bear markets of our lifetime have been survivable, the investors of today presume, reasonably but not necessarily correctly, that they'll be able to weather this storm as well. It's been said that every correction is different, but that investor behavior doesn't change. Bad investors panic and sell. Good investors get nervous but hold. And the best investors get excited about potential opportunities. But how many people can point to Japanese investors at the end of the 1980s as having been successful throughout the totality of their investing careers? The Nikkei 225 hit an all-time high on December 31st, 1989, and it took until a couple of years ago to regain that level. For more than a third of a century, Japanese investors saw their portfolios stand at a lower level than it was at the end of the 1980s, provided they didn't add to their portfolio or invest in something other than Japanese stocks. We're in a situation now where Iran has clearly got the strategic upper hand in the war. The leadership of the country is prepared to allow its people to endure unthinkable hardships to retain their grip on power. They see the American and Israeli threat as being existential. The sense that most observers have is that they will fight to the death. The harm they intend to inflict will be felt immediately by American allies in and around the Persian Gulf, but ultimately by Americans and the rest of the Western world in the form of higher prices, instability, and massively reduced agricultural output. According to Timothy Snyder, the American historian specializing in the history of Central and Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, and the Holocaust, who left Yale to join the University of Toronto, Trump has already lost the war in every possible sense: morally, legally, politically, economically, reputationally, and strategically. If the war persists beyond the ceasefire, it seems likely, given the contradicting narratives coming from both sides, that oil prices will explode, food prices will explode, and the global economy will almost certainly implode. If Trump accepts Iran's terms, he will have little choice but to admit he lost. That would be total humiliation, something that also motivates Vladimir Putin to keep going despite negligible gains. No one seriously expects Iran to accept Trump's terms. The lessons of history tell us that there's really no such thing as a winnable war. Many consequences are difficult to foresee, especially when all the senior strategists have been fired and replaced by sycophants who do what the president wants. An adversary that refuses to bend the knee is something Donald Trump has not had to face in the U.S. It looks as though he needed a foreign theocratic autocracy to teach him that too can play the game of doubling down on self-harming positions to preserve status and control. This time is different. There are no examples in our lifetime where an oil crisis and global recession was triggered by the self-inflicted harm of starting a war with no identifiable objective and no honorable way out. This will almost certainly go down in history as the war that triggered a global recession.